Hello and welcome back to the FSF Podcast. I am Tim. I am your host. And this is a reminder that you are now watching or listening to a show that is made by nerds for nerds. So welcome to the Nerdatorium. Our guest today is an amazing American film editor with over 40 film credits since 1970. Now, he's collaborated with a lot of big name directors over the past, like Brian De Palma, George Lucas, George Romero, Herbert Ross, John Hughes, a bunch of others and as we go through some of the titles that this man has worked on, you will see that definitely there's some really cool stuff. Now, he's also an Academy Award winner. He's a Saturn Award winner. He's been nominated for plenty of others. And that Academy Award came for his work on the original Star Wars movie, which we now know as A New Hope. Back then, it was just Star Wars. Now it's Star Wars, A New Hope. But he's also worked on Empire Strikes Back, Carrie, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, one of my all-time favorites, and so many other movies. Now, he's also the author of a book entitled A Long Time Ago in a Cutting Room Far, Far Away, My 50 Years Editing Hollywood Hits. I am so very excited and pleased to welcome Paul Hirsch to the show. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm like I was saying in pre-show, I am very excited to have you here. Very excited to get a chance to talk with you. But one of the first questions, Paul, that I ask every guest that comes to the show, I almost said customer because I just got out of work. But every guest that comes to the show, we love to have their origin story. What got them interested into doing what they do? Why did they choose the career path or the job that they did? So in the story of Paul Hirsch, what's your origin story? What got you interested in being a film editor?
Well, there are many influences. I was born into an artistic family. My father was a painter. My mother was a dancer. And I attended the High School of Music and Art in New York. I was a percussionist. I played the timpani in the orchestra. And then I went to Columbia University and I majored in art history. And I planned at that point, and when I graduated, I applied to and was accepted in the Columbia School of Architecture. And I knew I wanted to do something creative in some way. But I was put off by the idea of, I just finished a 4-year program for my bachelor's degree, and I was entering into another 4-year program for a second bachelor's degree. And this put me off. I was ready to leave school and go out into the world. And around that time, a friend of mine who had graduated Columbia a few years earlier was editing a small film in his apartment near campus. And I visited him and I saw a moviola for the first time. Okay. And I saw the editing equipment, the splicers and the reels and the sound readers. And I always liked working with my hands, and I was fascinated by the tools. And I thought, I didn't know anything about it, but I thought, this looks really cool, especially the moviola. This was in 1966, before the Betamax. The Betamax came out in 1975. So at this point, the only way you could see a moving image was either by going to the movie theater or by turning on live television. There was no recording of video in those days. And the idea that you could, on a moviola, you could stop the action, stop on a frame, and then go backwards, or you could go slow, you could go fast. I thought this was incredibly, it was like magic to me. And I decided to pursue that, not knowing anything about it other than I thought it was cool. And I had, this was the mid 60s. And in the early 60s, the French New Wave had hit while I was in college. And I was very taken with the films of Godard and Truffaut. And, I was fascinated by movies, and I decided this is something I wanted to do. So I pursued it through a friend. I got a job as a gopher for an industrial film company in in Manhattan on Park Avenue, and on one of my errands, I went to a negative cutter who was looking for a trainee, and he offered me the job. And I went back to the office and I asked one of the editors. I said, what do you think? I mean, would I be better off doing that than this? He said, well, at least you'd be handling film, not packages. And I thought, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So even though it wasn't positive film, it was negative. But so after 2 weeks on the job, I gave 2 weeks notice, and I left and went to work for this negative cutter. And I worked there for 6 months. I learned all about the technical end of the business, how negatives prepared for printing and so forth. And after 6 months, I left his employ. I had stopped learning, and it was just becoming sort of negative cutting is a terrible job because it's very boring, but you have to pay strict attention. So it's sort of at odds with the, the demands are at odds with the level of interest.
Okay.
So anyway, I left that and I got a job as an assistant editor to a trailer editor who was working for a small company in Midtown that was cutting trailers and TV spots for United Artists and MGM. And they had started as a radio spot company and had expanded into film. And this guy who was the film department needed an assistant, and that was me. So I started there, and I kept learning. Now I was working with 35 millimeter, which was a change. And I started learning about that. And after a few months there, the business kept expanding, and the editor had more work than he could handle. So they started giving me little odd jobs. My first job was taking a featurette, which was a documentary about the making of a film called The Thomas Crown Affair.
Oh, yeah.
With Steve McQueen and Faye Dunaway.
Yep.
And they had made a 10-minute featurette on this film, and they wanted a 3.5-minute version of it. So I did that, and the client liked it, United Artists liked it, and they gave me one to do from scratch about Chitty Chitty Bang Bang with Dick Van Dyke. And I did that, and then I became an editor. They started giving me more and more assignments as an editor. And I cut trailers for a film called Negatives, directed by Peter Medak. And I did a trailer for the Peter Brook version of King Lear with Paul Schofield, and
okay,
did a number of trailers. And around that time, my brother Charles had gotten a job as a lowest rung executive at Universal in New York, and he was tasked with finding young writing and directing talent. And I think he was essentially a lightning rod for people coming to the studio looking for money. And somebody came with a project they wanted to have financed, they would send them to Charles and deflect them from taking up their time. So one of the young directors who came to look for financing was Brian De Palma. And Brian and Charles came up with a project which they proposed to the studio, and they were turned down. So my brother was not to be deterred, and he decided he would raise the money independently and produce the film outside of Universal on his 2-week vacation. So they shot this picture in 2 weeks, and the picture was called Greetings, and it was about 3 young guys who were trying to avoid the draft. This was the time of the Vietnam War.
Okay.
And it was a comedy about trying to stay out of the army, and one of the 3 characters was Bob De Niro. So the picture was a mild hit. It got Silver Bear at the Berlin Film Festival, and they got the financing for a second film. I left out an important step, which is when they finished Greetings, they needed a trailer for it. So they came to me. I cut the trailer for Greetings.
Okay.
And this is how I met Brian. And then
Okay.
after the success of Greetings, they got the money for a sequel that was intended to be called Son of Greetings. But they changed the title after we started shooting. Anyway, Brian hired me, and that was the first picture I did with him. And I was 23 years old and knew
Nice.
nothing. And I was armed with the confidence of the ignorant.
Yes, the young and foolish.
I thought, yeah, I can do this, no problem. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I was willing and confident. So,
Explains most of my decisions I made as a young man. So yeah, I understand.
yeah. So I did Greeting, did Hi Mom, and then 3 years went by. How many years? 2 years went by before I did a second film for Brian. 3 years went by. I'm sorry, I have to refer to my own book to remember the dates. My mom was 69. My second film was Sisters, which was in 1972. And, well, that's my origin story.
All right. That's a good origin story. I like the fact you have a sense of humor about it. That's pretty good. Especially being a young man and just being the charge ahead. I can do this, no problem. Just, show me what you need done. As the feeling I got from you there.
Well, Brian and I were both learning at the same time. He's 5 years older than me, so he was only 28, and he had directed a couple of films before that. One he had co-directed with a man named Wilfred Leach, which also starred Bobby De Niro, called The Wedding Party. That was a few years earlier, and Jill Clayburgh was in that one as well. And then he had done a kind of a murder spoof, I guess, called Murder a la Mode. And the pun is a reflection of the era. In these days, there were these two rival trends in England: the mods and the rockers.
Okay.
And the rockers dressed like motorcycle gangsters, and the mods dressed in nice suits, but they were all kind of young English punks. Anyway, Murder a la Mode.
All right.
So then Greetings was his third film, and Hi Mom was his fourth.
Nice.
And then I did 5 pictures for Brian before anyone else offered me a job.
Well, I mean, at least you had work.
Definitely. Well, it took 3 years between the first two, and then 2 years between the second and third. And then at that point, it started coming once a year. And my third film was Phantom of the Paradise. The fourth film was Obsession, and the fifth film was Carrie.
Oh, nice. Okay.
It was after Phantom of the Paradise that I was introduced to George and Marcia Lucas. And George and Marcia were big fans of the film and complimented me for my work, which is very nice. And then this is all described in great detail in my book, A Long Time Ago in a Cutting Room Far, Far Away, which is available on Amazon or Audible. You can hear an actor impersonating me. He's not impersonating me. He's doing his own voice. It's not my voice on the book, but
okay.
I hear he does a good job.
Okay. I was going to ask you about that, because I saw that it was on Audible. I haven't listened to it yet, but I just saw that this afternoon that it was on Audible. But let's talk a little bit about your book since you mentioned it. So it's tell everybody about the book. I mean, obviously it's a recap of your work history, but what are some things that people can look forward to with your book?
Well, I did not want to write a how-to book. I think those are the most boring books you can read. I've always been sort of a raconteur, and in 1999, I was on location in Vancouver. My wife Jane had not come with me. Our kids were still in school, and I was alone on the weekends and kind of bored. And I thought, for some reason, I'd been telling stories on the set, and that gets boring in the editing room. You go over to the set and you hang out for a little while and chat with the actors and so forth. And I'd been telling these stories with some success. And I thought I should really write these down.
Mm-hmm.
And I started writing them down. I described my experiences on a film I had just finished. That was pretty wild. It was directed by Charles Shire and produced by his wife, Nancy Myers. And it was called I Love Trouble. Okay. I should note that no film with the word trouble in the title has ever been a success. Hitchcock did a film called The Trouble with Harry. It was a big flop.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a film called Trouble in Little China, I think, and that was
Big Trouble in Little China. Yeah,
Big Trouble in Little China. So that didn't succeed either. So you young directors out there, you have a project, keep trouble out of the title.
That's solid advice. Okay.
At one of the meetings during the making of the film, the executives, were convincing themselves they had a big hit on their hands, and they said we should really think about, maybe doing a sequel to this. And I said, I have a suggestion for a title for a sequel. And they said, what's that? I said, More Trouble Than It's Worth. And they didn't like that.
They didn't like that suggestion, huh?
No, they didn't.
Okay. Well, let's whet the audience's appetite just a little bit more. What is one of the stories, maybe a short story that stands out in your mind that people can find in a book? You don't have to tell all the story, but give enough detail so that they know what they're looking for.
Well, I knew when I started writing this book, I thought, like I said, I didn't want it to be a how-to book, but I thought my war stories and the anecdotes and the interesting and difficult people that I had come across in the business made good stories. And I thought I just really wanted to share these stories with no intent other than to entertain. So this is the story of my work life. It's not my private life or my childhood or anything like that. It's just my adventures in film land. Excuse me. And most people are, as you showed by your first question, most people are interested in how did you get into the business? How did you get started? Mm-hmm. It's the main thing that people want to know. And then from there on, it's just you're going to find interesting anecdotes about the colorful personalities that I crossed paths with.
Sure. All right. Well, let's talk about one of those colorful personalities. Now, on IMDb, which I always say is the wiki page of Hollywood, and so sometimes these quotes are not always accurate, and we'll see if you actually said this or not. But there's a quote in there about you working with Brian De Palma, and I think it's about the movie Obsession, actually. And you talked about how there was a change of the one scene and how that encouraged Columbia to pick it up. It's a rather long quote, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you talked about how that was an interesting example of the significance of editing, how that one shot made that movie worthwhile to a movie company. Now, you even thanked Brian in your Academy Award acceptance speech for Star Wars back in 1977, or as it was just, as we know it now, A New Hope. But my question is, how did directing, because Brian De Palma is considered a legend as a director in Hollywood circles, how did he influence or affect
I can assure you he's for real.
Yeah.
He's not just a legend, he's a real person.
But how did his influence affect your career?
Well, Brian is a dedicated visualist. I think he's unparalleled in his conception of filming through visual means. I mean, he studied at the feet of Alfred Hitchcock, but the same interest in telling a story without words, but with images and action, influenced my later work. He was a big believer in, as Hitchcock was, in the point of view shot. A point of view shot is an objective shot of something or other that's sandwiched in between close-ups of an actor. So it's sort of like the construction of a sentence. He looks, he sees, he reacts. So he looks would be the close-up of the actor, and then you cut to what he sees, and then you cut back to the actor for his reactions. And from the context, from the look on the actor's face, and from the action that he's witnessing, you can understand what he's thinking. You can read his mind, and it produces a greater connection for the audience to the character, because you're inside his head and you're feeling what he's feeling and what she's feeling.
Okay.
When the first job I got that was not for Brian on a feature film, that is, was A New Hope, and I was able to apply some of those principles in one of the first scenes I cut, which was when Luke and Leia and Han escape from the Death Star and Obi-Wan is killed. And there's this parallel action between the fight between Vader and Obi-Wan, and Luke and the others assembling at the port, I guess, where the Millennium Falcon is parked.
Okay.
So using that principle of point of view, I was able to establish the geography of where everyone was. And so anyway, but Brian is always looking for a way to communicate story through visual means and not rely on dialogue. And he calls it pure cinema. And,
okay.
that influenced me. I try to use visual means as much as possible.
Yeah, I'd say sounds like it had a pretty large impact on how you see things, how you view things, how you move, how you adjust a movie as you're putting it together. So
yeah.
Okay.
This emphasis on movement, the eye reacts to movement. We're trained we're wired to react to moving things in our field of vision. So since it's called moving pictures, I try to keep things moving.
Yeah.
Don't want to let the ball hit the ground. You got to keep the ball in the air. So,
very good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That makes sense. All right. So, Paul, a lot of people, are familiar with the title of editor, and we've talked a little bit about what you do and, so far. And a lot of people see that in the credits and they go, oh, that person was the editor of this movie. But for those who haven't caught on by now, can you just explain a little bit in more detail about what the role of the editor is for a movie or a TV show?
Making a movie is a little bit like preparing a meal. So the screenplay is the recipe. The shooting, the casting and the shooting is assembling the ingredients for the meal. The editing is the actual preparation of the dish.
Okay.
So that's what it is. Everything that precedes, there's a recipe, so there's a plan. We're going to make chicken a la king. And we need chicken, we need potatoes, we need whatever it is. And they go out and get it, and then they bring it to the editor, the chef. And the chef takes the ingredients that were assembled based on the recipe, and he cooks up the dish according to the recipe, but may add a few touches of his own, of her own. to produce the final meal. And then the final touch is that we're not invited to the dinner.
Well, that's actually a really cool analogy. I've never thought of it in that light, nor have I heard it described before in that light. But yeah, so I can see that, that analogy. You're being the chef, you're in the back room, you do the the preparation, it gets put out, and everybody else gets to enjoy it, and you get to watch them enjoy it.
Right.
All right. Okay. One of the other things, Paul, I always like to ask people, especially when somebody who has a long career like yours, and you've worked on so many large IPs in Hollywood and all the projects you've worked on. Sometimes, though, there's a project out there that they just didn't get the recognition, or maybe could have used a little bit more notice. Is there one in your background where you look back and you go, that was a really good film, or that was a really good television show, that program needed a bigger audience, a better audience, and that would have had better success? Is there one where you look back and you say that's the one?
Yeah, I've never done TV, so I mean, I did one pilot, so I leave TV out of it. But
sure,
there's a picture that I did that I thought was a really good picture, and it was received with some success at the time. It wasn't like a failure or anything, but over the years, the pictures that I hear about from fans or writers or people like you with shows, they want to talk about Star Wars. They want to talk about the Hughes comedies, especially Ferris. And for a long time it was Ferris, and I think now Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is starting to overtake Ferris. But these are pictures that audiences love, and Mission Impossible,
sure,
of course. But the one that I feel was a really good picture and doesn't get the attention it deserves is called Falling Down.
Okay.
And it starred Michael Douglas.
Oh, yeah.
And Robert Duvall. And I thought it was a really interesting film that doesn't get the critical attention that it deserved.
Okay. If that's the one I'm thinking of, because I know I've seen it, but isn't that the one where Michael Douglas has like the buzz cut and the black glasses, and
yes,
it's like going to work every day and just kind of like one day has enough and just.
Well, the picture starts with him stuck in a traffic jam on the freeway.
Right.
And it's hot and he's frustrated, and a fly gets into the car and he can't, and it lands on his neck, and he's uncomfortable and he's hot, and the traffic, and it's just everything is just building up too much. And he does the most antisocial thing you can possibly do in LA. He gets out of his car and walks away, leaves his car on the freeway. And from that point on, he makes his way on foot across Los Angeles. It all takes place in the course of one day. And in the course of his crossing of Los Angeles, he crosses through the various social strata of the city, going from the poorer parts of town to the wealthier parts of town, and eventually winds up at the beach where his ex-wife is living near the beach. And I thought it was an early indicator of the plight of the sort of an early avatar of the Trump voter, the white male who feels that society is not working for him anymore.
Okay.
And at the end, there's a confrontation. Robert Duvall plays a policeman, a detective, who's trying to catch him, who's tracking as Michael Douglas crosses the city. He sort of leaves a trail of destruction behind him. He gets into confrontations with one person after another.
Right. Yeah.
And finally winds up killing somebody. And the part of the detective was originally offered to Michael Douglas. And he said, no, I want to play the other guy. I want to play the guy who goes crazy. So they thought, well, that's an interesting idea. And so they did. And what I find is one of the most interesting things about the picture is that the situations that this character, his name is Defense, it's on his license plate, DFENS.
Mm-hmm.
He works in the defense business. And we only know him by his name, by the name on his license plate, which is Defense. And Defense leaves the car on the freeway and he goes to try and make a phone call. And there's a grocery store that's owned by an Asian shopkeeper. And he goes to him and he tries to make a phone call, but he doesn't have change. So he goes to the shopkeeper to ask for change. And the guy won't give him change. He has to buy something.
Right.
So he's frustrated at this. And I think we've all been, or in those days, we had all been in similar situations. And come on, just give me change for $1. I have to buy something, come on.
Right. Absolutely.
And you can share his frustration, but then he winds up breaking up the store with a baseball bat. So
I remember that, yeah.
So we share his frustration, but we don't share his response to it. So there's this odd push-pull, attraction, repulsion kind of connection to the character. Where I understand. He goes to a fast food place and he orders breakfast, and they said, you can't order breakfast. It's after 11 o'clock. We only serve breakfast till 11. And, he pulls out a gun and he shoots up the place. So, you can identify with this frustration that, why, come on, I just want, what's the big deal?
Right.
10 past 11, what's the big deal? Just sell me the breakfast I want,
Exactly.
So, but, and I think also what played into that was the attraction to Michael Douglas as a movie star. Mm-hmm. So here's the guy, he's the star, he's a movie star playing this character that operating, he's behaving in a way that I understand, but I don't really endorse. And, so I think it's a really interesting picture.
I agree. Yeah, I had kind of forgotten about that movie until just now. And it's been a little while since I've seen it, but I do remember. And I think that when I saw it, I was a bit younger, so probably not being able to align with some of his feelings and thoughts maybe as much, but I think I'd probably appreciate that a little bit more now as an older man. I mean, I'm not looking to go crazy or shoot anything up, but I have been frustrated in traffic. I have been frustrated because I got to some place and it was 5 minutes past the point of time where I couldn't order a hash brown,
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. Okay. So Paul, when we started this interview, I asked you about your origin story. And a lot of the reason I asked that is because I like to know what makes people tick and why they do what they do. And, what drives them to be who they are, what they've done. And so this next question actually is a little bit along those same lines as well, because it gives me a little bit more insight as to you as a person and what you're doing now. So I call this the suggestion time question. What are you reading or listening to that everyone else should know about?
Well, I have to say that I live in Pacific Palisades.
Okay.
And we had fires here. You may have heard about them at the beginning of the year. And we were forced out of our home. And the house survived. And we're back in it, thankfully. But becoming a refugee and being forced out into the street with only the clothes on my back was an experience that required me to give my full attention to problems that I had not anticipated. And it's sort of like I describe it as I've been standing on one leg for the whole year.
Oh,
It's like
yeah.
it's been the focus of my attention has been, first of all, just getting a place to live, and then finding, and then repairing the house and cleaning it so that
Hmm.
it was livable again.
Sure.
So I can't say that I'm reading anything at the moment.
Fair
I've
enough.
sort of gotten out of the habit of reading, and um, I have, I do watch movies. I still like to watch movies.
Sure.
Um, so a very interesting picture that I didn't know about recently was on one of the streams. It's called Remember, with Christopher Plummer, and it's
Okay.
directed by Adam Agoyan, Canadian director, and very good picture, I thought.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll check that out. I always like to hear what people are reading, watching, listening to, because like I said, it gives me a little bit of insight into who, what you're through, kind of see things through your eyes a little bit, what you're looking at, what you're enjoying. So I'll take a peek at that.
And there's a British series called Outrageous, which is about the Mitford family,
Okay.
a family of 7 girls. Uh, One became a writer, Nancy Mitford, and I think more than one became writer. They were writers, and one of them was uh, married to the head of the fascist party in England, and
Oh, okay.
another of the sisters was a girlfriend to Adolf Hitler,
Oh boy.
and another sister was a communist who went to fight in the Spanish Civil War, all from one family.
Oh wow.
So it's all
That's quite
true.
interesting.
It's all true,
Oh
and
wow. Okay.
it's called Outrageous.
I will definitely check that out. That sounds really interesting.
It has a
Good.
wonderful use of music in the film, in the series.
Excellent.
I think
Okay.
they've only done one season so far, which I
Okay.
find very frustrating. I don't like series in general because I like a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Sure.
The open-ended nature of series I find manipulative and frustrating.
Yeah, I can
You
see that.
character opens the door and you cut to a picture of a close-up of a shotgun and it goes off and you cut to black. The next week. So come on.
I get you.
It's manipulative, and I like to stories to resolve either happily or not. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, that's
Okay.
my preference. It's just the personal preference.
No, hey, those are two solid suggestions. I'm excited about the second one because I love historical fact-based shows. So be very interested in that, especially because it's some, especially around the time of World War II, and I love World War II history. So okay, very cool.
Um,
Looking forward to checking that out, Paul.
there's another book. Its title I can't remember, of course, which was about, and it was also a true story. It's about an affair that the British Prime Minister Herbert Asquith uh, was Prime Minister at the beginning of World War One, and he was having an affair with a young woman. He was in his 60s, she was in her 20s, and they would drive around in his chauffeured limousine with the blinds drawn. It was their sort of portable uh, trysting place,
Aha.
and he shared with her all sorts of state secrets that he had gotten by telegram, and uh, and he wrote to her several times a day when they were apart, and um, she wrote back to him, and after his death, I think his wife discovered the letters and burned all the letters from this young woman. But his letters to her survived.
Okay.
And that was the basis of this book. I could look it up for you, but anyway, it's a really interesting story.
All right. Very cool. All right. All right, Paul, we have gotten to the point of this interview where it's time to ask you a silly question.
Okay.
Now, the basis of this question comes from our team member, Kathleen, who was walking out with her daughter, who's about 6.5 at this point. And somebody asked her daughter this question, but not Kathleen. And Kathleen thought, well, that's rude. You should never age out of this question. And that question is, Paul Hirsch, what's your favorite dinosaur?
Favorite dinosaur. I think I like the Stegosaurus.
Nice pick. All right.
The plates on its back.
Yeah. Very cool. It's a solid pick. You can't go wrong with Stegosaurus.
I grew up less than a half a mile away from the Museum of Natural History in New York. And my friend Michael and I used to go to the museum every Saturday morning and run around the halls. So we were very well versed with dinosaurs at an early age.
That's cool. That's a good memory to have. I like that. All right. Well, Paul, thank you so much for being on the FSF podcast today. Where can our listeners or viewers go to find out more about you, your work, your book, or anything else you've got going on?
Well, the book is available on Amazon and also at the Chicago Review Press. It's available as an audiobook, as I said, on Audible. It's on Kindle. There's a French translation. There's a Chinese translation. That's it. Otherwise, I'm happily retired.
All right. Very good. All right. Well, I'll make sure to put a link for the book down below. And also I'll put an Audible link down there for those of us who like to listen to books and not to read books. I'm a listener myself, but I'll put links down there in the show description down below so that people can check that out. Now, guys, if you haven't already, now would be a great time for you to click the follow button. That's a free action. It costs you absolutely nothing to follow the FSF podcast. You're following our show, subscribing to our show helps us to get more amazing guests like Paul Hirsch here today to have great conversations for you to be able to listen to. So we ask very kindly for you to click the like and subscribe button and give us a follow. It helps more than we can ever really describe to you. And check out Paul's book as well, because we only really scratched the surface of the stories that are going to be told in that book. And if you're a big fan of Star Wars, like me, Star Wars watch, wearing a Hoth shirt, but you can check that out. That's all out there for you to enjoy. And but yeah, check out Paul's work as well. So Paul, thank you for being on the show.
You're welcome.
Everybody, thank you for listening and or watching the FSF podcast. And may the force be with you as you continue to live long and prosper. Goodbye.
Copyright 2025 FSF Podcast. Reference any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF Podcast. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpodcast.com.